Okay, what's up, Tally? So this is going to be my tutorial on how to get your artwork into Oculus Home using Photoshop and using Maya, which you can get a student version of for free, or you should at least be able to get a trial. And you can also get a student license of Substance Painter, or you can get a 30-day trial. So first up, in Photoshop, some things we need to do. Um, no matter what shape your picture is, we need to make the image a square for texturing later. It's important. So what I basically did was I went to resize canvas size. I don't know what Photoshop you have, it may be different, but basically took the height of it and I made the width be the same so it would be a perfect square. Otherwise what it's going to do is it's going to take your image and stretch it to be a square, which we don't want stretched artwork. So make sure you have your artwork in a square, even if it's transparent on the edges, and save it. And let's get going with the picture frame. So inside of Maya, if you're new to Maya, you'll have to watch a different tutorial on just navigation. Just real quick, I'll tell you that alt clicking is how you rotate, and scroll in and out with the scroll wheel. I'll try to say anything else that's relevant when it comes to that. So we have our empty scene here in Maya. What we're going to do is hit space, and this lets us see different views. So you can see this is the top view, this is the front view, this is the side view. What I'm going to start off with is I'm going to go to the side view, and I'm going to come to this view button and select image plane, and I'm going to import the image. So this should be on my desktop, Ninja Bunny VR. Save it. So the reason we don't do this in the 3D view is because if we do it there, it will sort of stay sort of in our area everywhere, which what we want is we want a side view so that we can be in this view and have it stay put. So what I'm going to do now is move it around a bit and resize it. So if you use W, you go into move mode. If you use E, you're in rotate mode, and if you use R, you are in scale mode. So what I'm going to do is find the center block in scale mode. I'm going to scale it down. I'm going to hit F to focus it in the window. So you can always hit F to frame it, so to speak. And then I'm going to I'm going to use W to move it up above the ground. That's always good practice. And I'm going to move it forward just a bit because we're going to be working in the center here. Another thing I'm going to do, if your screen doesn't look like mine, it's this button. This is what we want to have open for all of our modeling. This is what we need, so it kind of looks like I don't know, a Minecraft block with a pickaxe. Make sure that's open. Make sure your screen looks like this. Everything else isn't too important. You want to make sure you're on modeling. That's important here in this menu. What I'm going to do is with the object mode selected, this block, I'm going to select this image plane. I'm going to come over here to layers, and I'm going to create a layer from selected. This isn't necessary, but I like to do it, and name it picture. And what that lets me do is it lets me turn it on and off if I want a clear picture. So now that that's set up, what I'm going to do is come over here and I'm going to click on this cube just to get us started with a simple cube. Move it up a bit, and I'm going to hit space again to go to our different views. And I am going to move this back behind, actually, is what I'd like to do. Now when your mouse is hovering inside a window and you hit space, it goes to that view. So I'm going to go to the side view real quick, and I'm going to select our new cube, and I am going to hit R to go to scale, and I'm going to scale it up. Now we can't see the picture now, so we're going to go click on this button right here. It looks like a cube, but it's not solid. You can see through it, and that makes it invisible in this view, but it's still normal in this view. So we kind of want to center it around the image, and we want to scale the sides along this axis. So of course we hit R to go to scale mode. I'm going to scale it. I'm sorry if I'm going quick. You can pause or slow it down. I want to I don't want to waste a lot of time in the video. And that looks like a good thickness for the border of our frame. I'll try to center it again. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So now with that, we need to come to our 3D view and make it look more like a frame. And this is the wrong direction to come from. We want to come from this direction. So make it about like that, I guess. So you can kind of see what it would look like. And that's kind of the thickness. You'll see later when we import it that it's going to be really, really big. And we're going to have to scale it down. So because of that, I don't want the border to be too thin because it will be scaled down. But I think that's a decent thickness for the picture frame. Now what we're going to do is we have three options here. We have vertex, edge, and face. A vertex is the point that connects edges. So all these corner parts of the polygon. The edges are the lines connecting all the vertices. And then the face is the actual polygon itself. So I want to select just this front face. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to bevel and click that, which is going to give us an inset in our picture frame. And you can pretty much leave it just like this, because what we're going to do is we're going to select this front face that we have now, and I'm going to come into my side view and I'm going to scale it down to match what our picture is. And it doesn't look like looks like it's got some extra space on the sides. So maybe you want to give yourself a little bit of room, or maybe you don't care if the edges are slightly cropped. By the way, I've already made this. Just make sure I remember how to do stuff. And this is my second go at it. So now that we have our border the way we want it to be, we need to move it into the picture frame, like so. If you want, you can have a flat frame, or you can have one that slightly kind of tapers in, which is what I'm going to do. So I don't care what you want. So we can move it in the past. What I want to do is I want to go just slightly in and then a bit more, like that. So we've moved it so it kind of indents a bit. It's not just flat, it goes in. And now to give the inside some thickness, I am going to, while this is selected, this front face, I'm going to hit Control E, which is going to extrude in any direction. And I'm going to extrude just a little bit down. You don't want to see that black. That means you're going through the back of it. So I'm going to go just inside of the picture frame, like that. So now we have a simple picture frame. Ignore that square. That's just an error. And yeah, that's about it for modeling the picture frame. So what we need to do now is we need to set up our UVs. The cube is already going to have UVs, so what you want to do is come up here to UV and delete UVs. Now I need to be in object mode and select the whole thing. Delete UVs. Now I'm sure you understand about UVs and such. or textures at least. But essentially, what it is, this is a good example. It's taking your 3D model. This is a shield I made from Dark Souls, and it's basically slicing it up and spreading it out on a table, you could say, to make it all flat so that you can put a texture on it, which is what we need to do now with the picture frame, or else it can't have a texture on it. So the way we're going to do this, I'm going to turn off the picture now. See, that was helpful. Is what we're going to do is we're going to assign UVs in a planar method, which means it's going to take either the x-axis, the y-axis, or the z-axis, right? You can tell from this diagram right here, this is z, this is x, and this is y. And it's going to project in that direction. So you can imagine it kind of like this. If you wanted to blast that image onto your picture frame, which direction would you come? You would come straight out like this, and that is the x-axis. So let's get started. First off, this is your UV editor. You'll want to have that open. You can go to Window, or maybe it's in View. It should already be here, but yes, you can come to UV and UV editor to open it if you don't see it. And all we care about is this 0 to 1 space, this square right here. Everything outside will not be in the texture, just this 0 to 1 space. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the polygon that the image is going to be on. And what I want is for this to take up most of the space, because Oculus Home can only have a 2K texture, which means that this square image will be 2048 by 2048, and we want your painting to take up the majority of that space. And for that reason, I am not going to assign a UV to the back of the frame, because it will be against the wall and it won't be visible, and so that would waste resolution in this space to give it to the back of this frame. So there's no purpose in assigning UVs and texturing the back of the frame. So I'm going to select this front face where the image will be. I'm going to come over to UV, planar, but don't click it. You want to click on the box beside it, and you can leave everything the same, except you want to change the axis you want to project from. And for us, we want the x-axis because that's coming perpendicular to the frame. So we hit project, and it will project, and you'll notice that it has created a projection from this polygon, but it's a square. It's filled up this. It's filled up the texture area, but your painting is actually a rectangle. So if we were to assign your painting in this, it would actually stretch it. So what we want to do is you want to hold down Shift, hold down right click, and you'll have this array of different options. You want to come over to the left where unfold is and click on unfold. You can unfold in a variety of different ways. It just takes some playing around to find the one you actually want. If I unfold like that, you see that now the UV matches the dimensions of what our actual model is. So you can come up here to textures, and you can turn on the checker map, which will basically show you what your why are my UVs backwards? All right, I think that's how it should be. So you can see how the UV is now matching how it should be. Didn't have to do that the first time, so I hope this doesn't mess anything up or make it backwards. guess we will find out. So, as I said, this square right here is where you want to keep it. For right now, I'm just going to move it outside of that square. And what we're going to do, I'm going to turn off this checker pattern. And we're going to move on to the next section, which will be this border. And remember, you don't want to select the edges because this is actually facing a different direction. This is facing outwards to the z-axis. You want to only select polygons that are facing the direction that you want to project from. So now that I have these front 4 polygons selected, I'm going to come to UV, planar, make sure it's on X again, and project. And here we have our frame again. It's also made it a square, so we need to hold down Shift and right click and unfold it. Now, because of all of this empty space in the middle, it'd be a bit of a waste to keep it like this. It'd be better if we could take each polygon and just stack them on top of each other and kind of compress it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from face mode to edge mode. And we want to select these edges, hold down Shift to combine clicks so you don't like re-click. If you want to select more than one thing, you hold down Shift. We're going to select all of these edges. You can see it here too, how they're orange. We're going to hold down Shift and right click, and we're going to come to cut. And what that's going to do is separate all of these on those edges. So now these are separated like that. And now we can come and I can rotate this, try to make it perfectly straight if I can. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. I'll take this one. Remember, R or E is for rotate. Okay. So we can just kind of drag and move stuff around and try to put these all together like that. Try to compress it. Oh, excuse me. So next up, we're going to do the outside border. And one way, what we're going to do is we're going to do a full loop all the way around, because each different face is, this is pointing up, this is pointing left, that's pointing right, all that. We're just going to do a full loop, and then we're going to cut it on an edge and unfold it into one long strip. So it's kind of like taking a tape and going all the way around. We're just going to make it one big loop, and then we're going to cut it and unfold it into a long strip. So make sure you select all 4 of these sides like this. And I'm just going to choose to project it up and down. It doesn't, you can go left and right or up and down. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go to UV, planar, click the box, change it to Y-axis because we're going up and down, and project. Now what we need to do before we unfold it is we need to pick an edge like that edge and hold down Shift, right click, and cut. Come back to face mode, where we can now select all those faces again. Shift, right click, and unfold. And now it's this really long strip. It goes all the way around the frame, and it's flat. So hit F to recenter, hit R to scale, and we want to scale this down. And we want to move it up, of course, back into here. And scale it down. What you're going to notice now is if we turn on the checker map, because we have scaled this down, the size of the squares is not going to match. It's actually going to be lower res, but that's not such a big issue. So now what I'd like to do, because this thing is so large, I want to also break this up. You don't want to break up a model too much normally because that's how you get UV seams where the seams don't match. But because this is a frame, it doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to select this edge and this edge and this edge and this edge. Shift right click, and I'm just going to cut so that these are all separated like so. This way we can compress it much easier. Put that out of the way. This needs to be more out of the way. Okay, so now we have the picture, the border, or the border, and the front of the frame. Now all we need to do now is do the inside border right here. So click that, and we're going to do the same thing as the outside. Click all 4 sides of the inside border and go to UV. Make sure it's on Y-axis. Project. Come to edge mode. Pick an edge, any edge. Make sure you click that corner edge. It's hard to get sometimes. Click that. Shift right click, cut. Select all of these faces now. Shift right click, unfold. And there is the inside border. Hit R to scale. All right. Now we want to take each edge. You can do it in the 3D view, or you can do it in this view. Select that one. Make sure you hold down Shift to select multiple edges or faces. I want to select that one. Select that one. And that one's already selected. Shift right click, cut. And now we have all of these separated in a nice, beautiful way. So what I wanted to do now is I want to try to give this picture as much room in the texture as possible. It's important that you don't go outside the lines of the 0 to 1 area, which is right here, or else that part will be cut from the texture. So you can get as close as you want, just don't go outside. I'd say that's the majority of the texture, so that means your image is going to have most of the resolution of the 2K texture, and the rest of that space will go to the frame. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to scale this down just a tad because it was just barely kind of on the line, which I don't like to mess around with. And we definitely need to tidy this up, tighten it, make them much tighter. Zoom in to make sure they're not overlapping. We don't want them to overlap. And then we'll take these pieces. It's easier if you take all of them, and I will flatten them horizontally like that. Yep, that looks good. And we will begin putting them over here. I'm not actually sure that this will work. I may need to scale some things down for everything to fit. But it's essentially just a game of Tetris now. Doing UVs isn't very fun, but putting them together at the end is kind of a fun little puzzle, making them be as compact as you can make them. And I think we'll be fine. We should be, at least. Alright, you want to be careful, stuff like this isn't touching. Make sure everything is separate. Boom. I'd say that's probably more compact than the first time I did it. Alright, do a quick check, make sure you're not outside the boundaries. And yeah, that's really the hard part over. So now we have our frame model, and it's got its proper UVs, ignoring the back. And now we can Control S to save. I'm just going to name this Tally. Probably should have been saving the whole time, but excuse me, it's okay. So now what we want to do is come to object mode and select the frame and export selection. You don't want to export everything because it might take that picture plane that we made. So export selection to desktop, and name it Ninja Bunny. FBX works fine, or you can go with an OBJ. That should be just fine. And export the selection. Alright, now we are done with Maya. Now let's go to Substance Painter. And we're going to create a new file. You want to make sure you're in PBR, physically based rendering metal roughness. Make sure your document resolution is 2K. Select your file, which is this right here, Ninja Bunny. And hit OK. And now we have our picture frame. So for Substance Painter, it's also Alt-click to move around, and it's Shift right-click to turn the HDR image like lighting around. So we can come over here to Smart Materials or whatever, and we can just drag one in to see if it works. You'll notice that the back is blank, as we have done purposefully, and we have a little texture going. So let's get started with texturing our picture frame. First thing we want to do is come over to Texture Set Settings. Here where it says Channels, hit the plus and add ambient occlusion. And the reason we do this is because if you don't manually add ambient occlusion and you add it to Oculus Home, it will be just black, permanently black. So this is a very important step. And we want to bake the ambient occlusion on our model. So with a normal model, you would take a low resolution model and a very high detail version, and you would bake all the detail from the high res to the low res into a normal map like this. And you have all of these different maps. We want to click none and just click ambient occlusion. We only want to bake the AO. Back in common, we want our output to be 2K. And because we don't have a high resolution frame, we're going to use the low poly as the high poly. So make sure you check that. And then all we do is just bake it and wait for it to finish. It is done. So now you can kind of see these shadows in the cracks that came from the ambient occlusion. If I drop this chrome material and you start hitting C, you can cycle through your different channels. So this is the base color. This is height. We have no height. This is our roughness, metallic, our normal map, and ambient occlusion. So delete that. And yeah, so next we want to add our image. So let's go to File, Import Resources, Add Resources, and we want this Ninja Bunny VR to be in here, and we want to set it as a texture. Add it to your project, and hit Import. Here it is. What I'm going to do is you have two types of layers. Works like Photoshop. Add a layer or add a fill layer. And what I'm going to do is fill layer, I believe, if I remember correctly, which is going to fill it with it's going to fill the whole thing with whatever you set it to. And then we're going to add a black mask, which means nothing happens except for what you set it to, like this. Oh, excuse me, I just had lunch. We're going to come over here to Polygon Fill, and we're just going to select that polygon. So everything is turned off except for this area. I'll go back to brush. Click. So this is your mask and this is your layer, just in case you are accidentally clicked on the wrong thing. Our base color, we want this to be the Ninja Bunny. And the scale is set incorrectly, so let's set it to 1. And we need to offset it like that. In fact, I think the scale is a bit wrong, to be honest. Let's see. Okay. So you want to play around with the scale and the offset. And that's not quite right. It's still a bit too big. What was that, 1.17? So 1.15. Still too big. 1.1. We're going the wrong direction. 1.9. 1.8. 1.17. 1.15. 1.2. I think that's correct. So the reason this is happening is because after doing it the first time, I went back and I made this into a square, which I shouldn't have done because I was doing a different method which did not work as well. So I'm actually going to undo that, and it should be much easier. So I'm going to select all that, select inverse, and then image crop, and then file, save. The reason I made it a square is because initially I was going to stamp it on, but stamping does not accept color data. So I'm going to reload it. Do this again, add a fill layer, add a mask, go to polygon, only select that one polygon. Come back to your layer, and in the base color right here, drag the texture. Why is it still doing that? Well, I guess we just have to do it the way we did before and just make it fit. Let's see. So this is better. This is one way you can do it. It was much simpler the first time. I don't know what's different. So you can hit F1 and F2 to go between 3D and 2D view. But yeah, in the end we still got it. So thankfully you can kind of drag it around and just drag it right on top, which should keep the aspect how it should be and all of that. Now another thing, if you feel that the image isn't quite right, you can come over here, right click your layer and add a filter, and then click on this to select filter, and you can sort of do color balance or color correction. And kind of mess with the I think this isn't the one I want. I want color correction. Well, I don't know what's going on, but you can edit that way. This actually looks better than the first time I went through doing it. It had lost kind of its like the blacks weren't very dark the first time. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put kind of a texture on it, so it's not like this smooth sheen onto it. We want to give it like a papery texture. And this kind of has to do with some experimentation, but what I've done is under Smart Materials, there is a texture called Plastic Glossy, which I'm going to drag above, and you can already see it has kind of this this bumpiness to it that looks very kind of papery. So what we're going to do is, first off, we are going to add a black mask again and only select the middle using the polygon fill. And now we're going to open this folder with the folder button right here. And we are going to click on the plastic base. And you can see that it has a normal, it has metal, it has roughness, it has height, and it has color, but we don't want color because the color is blue. So if we turn that off, now it's transparent. I'm going to turn it back on just for a second though, because we want to get rid of this this weird gloss. It looks like someone pissed on your painting or something. So if we go to the grunge right here, and we click on the mask, which is always to the right of the layer, and you click on this mask builder, we have all of these different settings that we can drag around and edit how our image looks. So I'm going to max this thing out. And we still have a little bit of that smoothness, so I'm going to go to the grunge and just get rid of that. So now all we have is that rough kind of texture to it. And now if I go here and I turn off the color, now it has this very subtle paper effect that you don't even notice in Home unless you look at it in the light up close. But it's subtle, and it adds a little something to the artwork, I guess. So next up is the picture frame, and what I like for the picture frame is to find a nice wood like this, drag it on top, right? And now we want it to affect everything but the picture. So rather than doing a black mask, I'm going to do a white mask, and I'm going to select the middle. You might have to drag that down to black, right? Because if it's a white mask, you don't want it to be white, you want it to be black, and that's how you separate it. So now we have our wooden frame on it. Now what I'm going to do is I kind of want this effect where the wood grain goes with the board on all sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this layer where the wood is to rotate, and I'm going to set it to 90. Now if you have all of your UVs displayed vertically, then that means that the wood grain is just going to automatically work how we want it to. It's going to go into the corner, and it's going to look like it was cut and glued together in that direction. Now the outside is not that way. You have two options. You can be lazy and leave it, or you can try to fix it. Now these down here are facing a different direction, so you're never going to have them work together. So I need to put that back at 90 degrees. So the only thing you can really do that I know of is to just make another layer, add a black mask, and select all of these again. You want to do the inside too, probably. Although the inside doesn't seem to be going with the board, but honestly, I don't care about the inside. I'm sorry, I don't care. So now we have this nice, excuse me. Oh, they're all not going with it because I haven't changed it yet, that's why. So now we can go here and rotate it. No, it is. Okay. Let me make sure that this rotation is still good. So the wood grain from this is affecting this, so we want to remove it from our texture. So we want to come over to the mask. Make sure you're not in the image. Make sure you're on the mask, and make sure you are filling the polygons opposite. Right? You see how the wood grain's going against it, and the normal map of the wood grain is kind of affecting it. So we're gonna remove it. There we go. That looks much better. like that, and like that. Hit F to frame it. Frame humor. And so now we have some other options. What we can do is play around with the wood color. So because this picture isn't really bright, it wouldn't make sense to have a very bright frame. So I'm going to keep it in this range of kind of brown, not gray, but we want it to be. I'm going to make it like kind of dark, kind of like that. That looks pretty good. And so now we need to do the same thing with the outside. I wish there were an easier way to copy it. I guess I could just kind of eyeball it. That looks pretty equal. And what you can also do, I kind of like how it is right now, but you can also click on the first one and you can play with some of these settings like fibers. How many fibers does it have? That changes the look of it a little bit. You can also change the scale. So if we scale it up, it's crazy. Scale it down. You can also mess with the offset if you want just a different look. So if you had to make 10 different frames, you could just easily change this setting. But I'm kind of liking how it is right now. And that's pretty much it. We've got our wood frame, we've got our picture, it's got its paper texture on it, and it's ready to be exported and put into Home. Now, if you have other artwork, you don't necessarily need to make a frame for every single one. You don't have to do this whole process. Now that you've made one frame, you should be able to use it for others. So even if your image has different size um, variations, you could technically put it on this specific frame. Um, like for instance, if you had a landscape image, you could use the same frame but flip it sideways. And what you could do is, let's say your image is a square like this box. Ooh, I don't want to do that. Let's say your image is a square, and you want to use this specific frame, but this frame has a rectangle cut out. What you could do is you could put your square image right here and stretch it into a rectangle. And then once you've exported the model, you can essentially go like this. Take your rectangle image or your rectangle frame with a square image that's stretched, and you could scale it down into square, and then it will all be corrected. It will take some finagling, mind you, to get it correct. But that is one easy way that you could have multiple artwork in one. All you would do is come back to your texture file in Substance Painter and just replace this with whatever other artwork you want, and then re-export it. So yeah, now let's get this thing into Home. What we want to do is you want to save this. I already have one, but I'll call this tally 2. What we want to do is we want to come to export textures. I want this to be on desktop, and I want a new folder called tally that this all goes into because it's a bunch of files. So put it in a folder. Make sure you're on 2K. Make sure your configuration is on GLTF PBR metal roughness, and then export. Export successfully finished. Okay. So now we have our folder. It has all of our textures in PNG format. It has the bin file. It has the GLTF file, and it also has a GLB. Now, GLB is what is already used. That's the file that you add to your import folder for Oculus Home. Your import folder is found in your PC documents, Oculus Home, import. So the GOB combines all the models and textures into one file. So you could just go ahead and add this to your import and you're ready to go. It will be waiting for you in Oculus Home. The problem is that it's going to be ginormous. So what we need to do is we need to resize it. Now there's not a whole lot of software, believe it or not, that can import a GOB file. You can't just go into Maya, come to File, Import, and import, GOB, right? Unrecognized file type. You're going to see that pretty much everywhere, but there is a web-based editor. It's called 3js.org/editor/ right here, and you can do it here. We can come to File, Import, and import our GOB, which is usually the biggest file. Remember, Oculus cannot accept bigger than 15 megabytes, and this is 11.2. Now, it doesn't look big in comparison, but actually, now that I'm looking at it, the way that it goes through the floor just like this, you can probably avoid it by scaling it down in Maya, but I haven't had success with that in other situations. What you can do now is a good way to start is to start off with 0.1. That's a good way to start. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to import the one that I already did, which is called Ninja Bunny 2. So here is Ninja Bunny 2. .15. So these are two separate 3D models, which is why they're different sizes. So let me try to get these equal to each other. That's pretty good. That's decent. And then we'll delete the Ninja Bunny 2. Just have the tally. So here's where some problems arise. So now if we try to export GOB, even though we've changed nothing about the files except for just the size, like the physical size of the model, the size of the size of the file, not the physical dimensions, but the size is now over 15. So we started out with a 11 megabyte file, but now that we've come into this program and changed the dimensions, now all of a sudden it's 17, which is too big, which is a problem. This won't always be the case. If your file just happens to be small enough to start with and you do this, it could be under this size. But if it's too big, here's what you do. You use this GOB packer right here. I guess I'll have to add these links because that's a complex kind of link. And I'm not going to download this. So what you want to do is select not your GOB but the GOTF, right? You can go to properties to look at it and see that it's GOTF. You want the bin file and you want all of your textures. You want to make sure to convert from PNG to JPEG. Then you drag everything in and it will leave you with a small 2.3 megabyte file called out. You can call it anything you want, but so I want to save it as, I'll just leave it as out. And now we can come back to the J3S. I'll move that out of the way. And let's import our new out file, which is a smaller file size. And so now, when we resize it, delete that. Now I can export this GOB, and it won't be a ginormous file size. Again, this step is only needed if your initial export is bigger than 15 megabytes, which ours was 17. If you can fit it under 15, it will look a bit better because the textures will be PNG instead of JPEG, but it's not an incredibly noticeably difference. So, okay. I'm just going to save this directly to the import folder, and I'm just going to call it Ninja Bunny 3. You need to be careful when you use multiple attempts on a file not to overwrite it, because Oculus doesn't necessarily update it. It will take your folder and it will update it, or it will upload it to their servers, I guess. And just simply renaming or overwriting my original bunny does not mean you're going to get the new 3D model. So I always name it something new. I don't overwrite. So I'll name this Ninja Bunny 3. I will hit save. Don't need that. Don't need that or that. And now we can check Oculus Home for the picture frame. So I will take off my mic and headset and go into VR. Here you can see, I don't know if you can hear me at this distance, but here you can see my first frame that I did. You can go to inventory, import, and now we have the Ninja Bunny 3. Ignore this weird shadow glitch that's happening. But yeah, now you have your artwork in VR. Actually, that seems to be tied to that. I'm not entirely sure why that glitch is happening. Alright. Well, I hope this helped, and I hope you can now do it yourself.